Thanks for joining me once again, thoughtwrestler.blogspot.com. In this video, I want to talk about the NSA, Edward Snowden, and the historical backdrop for some of these spying scandals, so to speak. When we signed the Patriot Act into law, it opened the door for a new level of surveillance on the American public, a new legal avenue. We know through our reading of history that the government has spied on citizens dating back to as early as the 50s and probably even before that. But in 1956, the FBI, under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, started a program called the Counterintelligence Program. The shortened acronym was COINTELPRO, and the goal of the COINTELPRO was to put an end to the communist scare inside of our country. They started out with surveillance of alleged communist leaders, and then that moved into the realm of civil rights leaders. Dr. King was a target of the counterintelligence program. Medgar Evers, Stokely Carmichael, AIM, the American Indian Movement, they were victims of the counterintelligence program, and even Puerto Rico, as Puerto Ricans tried to get some sort of liberation for themselves to get away from the control of the United States government. They sought to gain their independence, and they were under the surveillance of the FBI. So with the last year, Edward Snowden, released his document dumps and showed that our cell phones were being tapped and that the government was collecting metadata on several things. And a lot of people were up in arms about this, and I just couldn't understand where all of the outrage was coming from. I mean, not just that I'm some hip guy that understands these things, but the government's been spying on us for decades. I mean, it's nothing new. Inside the documents at the counterintelligence program, they laid out specific goals. One of their goals was to prevent the rise of a messiah figure inside of the civil rights community. That was why Dr. King was such a target of the counterintelligence program. It's amazing that J. Edgar Hoover at one point said that Dr. King was the most dangerous man in America. And so when we feel threatened as a country, anytime we feel scared, and the fear that was natural after 9/11, it caused some people to voluntarily give up some of their liberties in order to secure a level of safety that they thought the government could provide through these means. And now we've seen this evolve. The wiretapping program of the early 2000s was the basis for the NSA to do all of the metadata collecting that they've done with cell phone records. So inside the construct of government, there's always this need to want more power, need to have more control, and one way to do that is through the surveillance of its citizens, surveillance of foreign leaders. We had actually tapped one of our allies, Angela Merkel, her cell phone. We were actually surveilling her. So, it surprises me that so many of my fellow citizens are still upset about this, and the hyper-partisan nature of the attacks are really confounds me, because under the Bush administration, we were surveilling people, warrantless wiretaps, and now under the Obama administration with the collection of the metadata. But again, we don't look through a historical lens when we talk about these scandals. These things have been going on, and it doesn't make it right. I'm not excusing one administration versus the other, but as citizens, we've got to have some sort of realistic goal of, changing our government if that's what we want to do, or having the kind of oversight necessary. We say we want to have security and that we'll give up some privacy for security, but when that happens, we find ourselves outraged. And so that's the problem that we're facing now. To a lot of citizens, it just seemed out of the realm of possibility that their government could spy on them. And again, many of my heroes, civil rights leaders, people I've read about, spent a lot of time learning about, these same men and women who are glorified now, 40, 50 years later as heroes and patron saints of American freedom and liberty, were the targets of these programs. So SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Council, and the list goes on and on and on. I mean, basically every figure that you learned about in school, if you're my age and I'm almost 40 years old, every figure that you learned about in school from the late 50s on, I mean, was probably a victim of this kind of surveillance. So that's the perspective that I want to have with this. Now, this was taken from a piece that was on the website thoughtwrestler.blogspot.com last year, and it was the historical perspectives on the loss of privacy and the breach of the social contract. And what I tried to do was explain how inside the social contract, going back to Thomas Hobbes' work, The Leviathan, and maybe through Jean-Jacques Rousseau's social contract, just show how we as citizens have given up certain powers, that we have certain liberties to a sovereign, with the understanding that that sovereign would seek to protect us and keep us safe. Yet we have given these freedoms up freely, these liberties up freely, and we see how that can be abused and turned against us. So it's an interesting quagmire we find ourselves in, and I don't know that there's any easy solution to it. But the idea that the NSA program and Edward Snowden and the Obama administration is doing something that is unheard of or never done before, I mean, it just doesn't pass the historical accuracy test. So with that said, I would hope that you could go to the blog, support the blog, thoughtwrestler.blogspot.com. Thanks for your time, and I will see you shortly. Peace.